Welcome to my bi-monthly update. Usually I tell a little bit what happened in the past and what the board is discussing and what might that mean for the future. In this update, I would like to focus on the upcoming annual meeting. We had 2 annual meetings the last 2 years where we had virtual meetings, and we tried to not to make very substantial decisions and substantial discussions, because in virtual meetings we always need to have 2 sessions and we cannot sit in the same room and have discussions together with people understanding the same message at the same time. I think we need to change a little bit, because we cannot behave on that for the next, I don't know how many years. Nobody knows when time will change. We hope we all hope that we meet in person next year, but yeah. So we decided to have some discussions about the strategic priorities, and we decided to have some discussions about the outcome of the task force's governance review and stakeholder review. That's the reason why Dwight is here, because he is the chair of the governance report task force, and that is on the agenda. That's the second part. The first part is the more formal aspect, financials, budget, and some resolutions, and yeah, not very sexy indeed, but we need to do that because that's it's necessary. The second part is talking about strategy and what's the outcome of our strategy meetings, what's the impact of this outcome to the way we are doing the business in ICMCI. And so I would like to focus on these 2 reports. One is from the stakeholder and one is from the governance review, because some of them might have impact on the IMCs. Some of them might be quite new, because we discussed things that we haven't discussed in the last 35 years. But things are changing, and so I think it's time to re-evaluate. As we as ICMCI, I think we need to change too. It's like when we talk to our clients and tell them you need to change, the client might say you need to change too. And that's the situation. So I would suggest for this meeting that Dwight is bringing some core outcomes of the task force. He will not read the whole report because it's a very long report, and not go to every detail. I think 59 resolutions, that 59 actions, that's the outcome in detail. And as Jeremy is not here, I will bring after this the outcome of the stakeholder review task force, which is also quite substantial, but not in this full extent compared to governance review task force. So if you agree, I would like to hand over to Dwight. Thank you again for coming, because he has been here in the morning session, which is morning in the middle of Europe. It's in the middle of the night in Canada. So thank you for being here again, and I hand over to you.
My absolute pleasure. I forgot when I was chair.
You sound a little bit far away.
Okay.
Maybe you switch the mic.
Maybe. Let me just check.
That should be better.
Much better.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Sorry. Thank you for letting me know. That would have been hard for everyone to listen to me. I switched cameras, but I didn't switch the mic. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity to present. The governance task force report did take on a bit of a life of its own. And it is as a result of our history. In our first 35 years, we have done things in a certain way. And the first over 25 of those years, it was very much a volunteer organization. Volunteers would come together once a year, and they would make decisions about how they could collaborate and work together, and then they'd go away, work on that, and then come back together the next year. So, you know, things moved on at the pace that volunteers are able to move them on. 8 years ago, we were fortunate enough, following breakthrough strategy, to have a full-time executive director. And that really changed the way we operate, because now we have on one side the governance of the organization, which is accountable for determining what our objectives will be, our strategy will be, our resources are, and that is driven by our delegates, of course. And then on the other hand, we have the executive director, who has a staff organization and is accountable for implementing that strategy. So this makes a differentiation between governance and management. At the delegates level and at the executive director level, it's relatively clear in terms of what we do. But at the committee level, there's been increasing confusion about roles and the role of the committees. Because on the one hand, traditionally committees have done both. They've done the development of new programs and the recommendation of policies, which is governance work. And then on the other hand, they've implemented those programs, which is operations work. And if we don't have clarity on that, it does create confusion between governance and management, and you know, the role of volunteers in doing the work that they need to do. The analogy that I use is a ship on the ocean. If the owner is the one that decides where the ship will go, and the captain of the ship decides how they're going to get there. So it's the same thing in non-profit organizations. Best practices are that the stakeholders, the owners, in quotation marks, of the organization determine the direction and the destination. But the staff organization determines how best to get there with the resources that are available for them. So as Robert said, I'm not going to go through all of the resolutions, but I did want to point out a few of the key ones that have impact on us. And then I'll talk about implementation a bit at the end. So the first one is to really clarify the roles of the standing committees. Part of that is redoing the terms of reference, not only for the board, but for the directors and officers of the board and of the standing committees, just to make sure that we've clarified and have an understanding of those roles. The second part of that is clarifying the role of volunteers in the governance part of the organization and in the operations part of the organization. Because if I'm the executive director and I need to rely on volunteers to help execute, those volunteers have to understand that, you know, they're volunteering their time as part of the staff organization, or are they volunteering their time as part of the governance organization, or are they doing both? But in which case they have to know which hat they're wearing, so that we don't create a schizophrenic executive director who has to work through negotiation. We don't want that, do we, Rima? The other aspect that we have in that is single point of accountability. So from the perspective of the delegates, which comes together once a year at the annual meeting, we're recommending that they would hold the board accountable as their arm of governance for all work between meetings of the annual meeting. We do recommend, however, that the delegates would require through bylaws that there would be 2 standing committees. One of those would be the Finance and Audit Committee. Interestingly, we don't have that in the bylaws now, but that's a critical piece for delegates to understand what's happening in terms of the resources that have been allocated to the organization. So we feel that should be a standing committee, and it should be chaired by the treasurer, who's a member of the board. The second one is we're recommending that the current NSPC, which is Nominations and Succession Planning Committee, should have slightly broader terms of reference and be known as the Governance and Nominations Committee. So doing all of the work it previously has done in terms of succession planning and managing the nominations process, but also being aware of best practices and overseeing that and ensuring that ICMCI is up to date. Both of these committees, of course, would prepare reports on status directly to the annual meeting. But our feeling is that best practices is that the board would be the holding point for the oversight in day-to-day work of those committees. We also then recommended that there should be 4 other standing committees, but they would be under the authority of the board to provide them the authority to change the terms of reference or increase or decrease the accountabilities of them for the membership committee, for QAC, for professional standards, and for marketing and advocacy. The last point on this is that we also feel that there should be a more direct link between each director of the board and the major activities of ICMCI. So directors should be recruited for their expertise in those main areas. So if you have 6 standing committees, you would think that at least one director would be on the board that had expertise in that area. And if there was a standing committee, that they would be the chair of that standing committee. So it creates this direct, tight linkage between the work of the board and the important strategic initiatives of ICMCI. Other directors who have special activities that they're accountable for by the board would have the authority to create task forces, of course, if necessary, to bring people together to do work. So we're not saying that we want fewer volunteers, but we're saying is we want to increase the flexibility, the agility, if you will, about how we do our work. The executive director similarly would have the authority to create working groups of volunteers to bring together to do work as part of the operations and the implementation of activities of ICMCI. So that was it for the volunteers. So the single point of accountability then does become really important, both in terms of the delegates holding the board accountable for work between meetings of the annual meeting, but also single points of accountability for those who are creating policy or those who are implementing policy, and ensuring that we as an organization are able to build things around that. Now, in terms of implementation, we're not recommending that on October 14th, after the next annual meeting, that this be implemented, because there's a lot of concepts here that we're bringing forward and that do need discussion. For example, the single point of accountability for standing committees would require some bylaw changes, and you can't do that until October 2023. So it gives us opportunities for open discussion around these ideas. On the other hand, some aspects of the report are quite straightforward and in fact reflect best practices and things that are often happening, although maybe not quite consistent with policy. For example, the terms of reference of the committees. That kind of work can move ahead more quickly, but also in consultation. So we have time through events like this where we can consult with delegates or at the hub meetings, which are coming up. Speaking of hub, I'll make that point about agile hubs and through other consultations, because what we want to be sure is that we're doing this the right way. So it might take a little bit longer to get it right, but let's make sure it's fundamentally correct so that over time we're able to stay with the same framework for how we do our work, because this isn't the kind of thing that we want to change regularly or often. So I'd rather we take a bit more time and make sure that we're leaning on the best minds around the world in all of our institutes so that we can come up with the best solutions possible. I did skip over the hubs, and Rob had reminded me this morning, so I'll come back to it now. The hubs are a very important mechanism of collaboration between institutes and an arm of ICMCI in terms of reaching out to institutes in a coordinated way. Up until now, the hubs have been organized around geographical areas. But as we know, over the last few years, a lot of geographical barriers, geographical boundaries are starting to break down, and rightfully so. So we do recommend that we look at the hub structure not to say we should stop meeting as in geographical areas. Asia Pacific Hub, European Hub, the Americas hubs, all are doing very good work. But there may be other ways, more agile, that can be where we could use the hub structure to bring together institutes to solve common problems. So just to say that that's another thing on the agenda. So that's the overview I wanted to provide, but I'm very happy to answer any questions, or Rima and Rob were both at all of the task force meetings. So if you have anything to add, please jump in.
Thank you, Dwight. Now I would like, to ask you: is there what's your first impression? Is there anything you should clarify, or is?
Robert, Christian, hello everybody.
Christian.
Hi, Christian.
I stepped in a little bit late. I'm sorry. I understand that this, I haven't read the document, so I don't have a lot to comment on. But I understand the idea is to have more people working on the executive side. Is that right?
More people generally. I think, the more volunteers we can bring into the effort, the better, but with clarity between those volunteers who work on the governance side, so the board and standing committees, and also to ensure that the framework is there for volunteers to support the staff structure as well. So it's not so much about numbers as ensuring that people are clear about what their accountability and authority are as volunteers, whatever they're doing.
May I say something that maybe would make it clearer to Christian by giving an example, because he's on the QAC. So for example, Christian, the QAC itself is all about managing what our competency framework implementation is all about. But the assessors are actually doing the assessment, which is an executive. So assessors would be executive somehow, and we would be responsible as the executive office in how the assessments are run, that everything is running smoothly, similar to what we're doing now, but now we're doing it in support of the QAC chair. Moving forward, that would become supporting directly the assessors somehow. You can see the difference, right?
Okay.
It's clearer.
I need to think a little bit if it's going to work or not, but I
Yes.
believe that you have thought about it already.
No, but we appreciate your thoughts.
Does this mean that you will have some hired people, or more hired people to help? Or it's going to keep on being done with volunteers?
We intend to depend on volunteers to a large degree. Part of the problem now is that a lot of volunteers that should be really understanding that they're part of implementation feel they're part of the governance structure, so are there more to want to vote than to actually do real work. So if we clarify what the volunteer job is better, then I think we can get people better aligned to the work that needs to be done. We're not proposing budget increases here, although there might be some realignment of some budgets under the authority of the executive director. I hope that we will have more staff over time as our organization grows. But that's not related directly to this.
What you mean mainly is that we aim this way to get more commitment from volunteers, because we depend a lot on that commitment and it's not always available. Is that right?
That's true. I mean, there are some committees that are there, and typically they have been making the decisions and voting on policy and doing the reports and so on. And what's happened is that over time, the secretariat under REMA does all of the work, prepares all of the reports, but they, you know, and it is staff work. They should be doing that work, but that committee is there. So then they have to wait until the next committee meeting. They present it. The committee says, yeah, that's good. And then it moves on. So it becomes almost a roadblock instead of, you know, of the support to the staff organization. So let's tease apart those things that are under the authority of REMA and make her accountable for doing that, and let the committees focus on those things which are policy development, where we really do need that expertise and support.
But the existing concept was developed 35 years ago, and at this time, I don't think anybody in this group joined at this time, but it was developed with the background that everything needs to be volunteered. Nothing happened without volunteering. And for example, the marketing committee, the chair of the marketing committee, they did everything or not. And I think it's just about clarity to say, okay, we need a volunteer really doing the job hands-on, or we need somebody to develop and need somebody to think in terms of developing strategies or developing tools or whatever. And it's just to say, oh, we need somebody for this or somebody for that. And I don't think we have too few. We always have too few people who support us, of course, but many of us, many of us can do both. We just want to know. and at the end of the day, if somebody says you did a lousy job just because we didn't tell you what to do, okay, then we cannot complain. And I think it's necessary to have clarification and everybody knows what's going on. We cannot afford, I don't know how many employees to do everything that needs to be done in this organization, because that would be a huge stuff. It's the other way around. So we need to sort out the things that are automatically can be done by some digital tools, and do the same workload plus with the same stuff. That's actually what our members want to hear.
Okay, my opinion, just last comment is, I think it's the right way. As I said, I need to read a little bit better.
Of course.
But I think it will be a very extremely important how the idea is presented to delegates, because it's not an easy way to understand it. Okay, it's not an easy concept to be understood. So if you want to be successful in having approval, you will have to do a very good job explaining this to delegates in details, okay? And it's just an opinion, right?
I think it's very important to understand that this is the outcome of the task force, and they just recommend to do so. They don't have a ready concept, do this, that, and that, and then you will succeed. It's just, we need to have more clarification in many questions. That's one out of them. It's 59, and the outcome is, let's elaborate on that. We need to discuss together, and there are so many things that are linked together that we need to be aware of some side effects. We don't even think about it this time, but they might come up. But absolutely, I totally agree. It's highly important. Like every time, if we don't present it in a way that everybody understands, we won't succeed.
Exactly. So Robert, I'm on virtual meetings all week with clients. So the 4 a.m. meeting, I was able to stay the whole time, but I had to step out of a client meeting for this one. So once we're finished this session, I apologize, but I'll have to step out.
Sure. Any further question to Dwight? Okay. Thank you, Dwight, for joining.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it, and thank you for this tremendous work the task force did.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Bye. Talk to you soon.
Bye,
Bye.
Dwight. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I would, let's move over to the outcome of the stakeholder task force. That is a task force that is actually the outcome of a resolution we had last year. Last year, we had a resolution in the annual meeting that basically says, take a look outside of ICMCI and how do we deal with our stakeholders with regards to the management consulting industry or profession, however you call it. And that is the purpose of this task force, chaired by Jeremy Webster, who is the secretary. And he had a little bit, of course, it's a look outside, but also a small look inside. One of the first recommendation, he had 3 recommendations that's in the report, and the first one is we need to have a special status how we deal with organizations that are not members of ICMCI but want to be part of the community. We call it observer status. That is something, the naming observer status is out of ISO committees. They have permanent members, the P members, and the O members, the observer members. But we don't want to talk about members because it's from a formal aspect, they wouldn't be members. They might pay a small fee, but they cannot vote, they cannot volunteer, they cannot award a certification like the CMC, because that is only something an assessed member can do, and we don't want to change that. But organizations on global level, like the Project Management Association or other international or other global associations, they don't need to be necessarily global. It might be something that is regional, or even organizations that are in a country, maybe where we already have a member. It might be that we are running in a situation, or actually we are in a situation that one member is addressing the professionals, the individuals. One IMC is addressing the professional, the individuals, and there is another organization in the same country that is addressing the firms. And they don't compete each other. They exist, both exist together in the same country. And there is one member that is a full member of ICMCI with all the benefits and all the duties. But maybe we find a way how to attract other members in the same country, organizations in the same country, to be affiliated with ICMCI and being part of the community, because we want to speak for the whole profession. That's our strategy. Our strategy is about the profession and not about small parts of the profession. And I think that is a very interesting approach. It needs to be discussed in detail. It's definitely not that we want to have more than one member in a country, because that would open a full box of questions. That would be very radical. We have it in our bylaws. We cannot, our bylaws say one member per country. So if we would open that, it would be very, very complex. And the question is it worth to discuss it? Or do we have solutions for this problem which are very easy to implement? And we most probably wouldn't even need the bylaws changing, because we can do that if we set up a policy for how to deal with observer status or affiliates that have the observer status. It's also something that came up in the discussion with some members that we do have that are not able for the time being to be full members because they don't achieve the criteria, including paying fees, but also other criteria. And for the time being, it's very unrealistic that this will change in 1 month, 1 year, maybe 2 or 3 years. everybody's hoping that normality, whatever that is, will come back to these countries, and then they can become full members again. But that would be a solution for a very small number, but an existing number of members that we would need to exclude from our community, and we do not want to do that. We want to become more members, not fewer members. Yeah, I think that is the outcome of the stakeholder task force. That is, of course, something that is quite prominent because everybody might have the first reflex, whoops, what's going on here? It's not the way that we want to compete the IMCs. It's the other way around. We want to support IMCs. We want to give IMCs the possibility to liaison with other organizations in the same country, being the lead affiliate as a member of ICMCI, but offering the CMC, for example, for other organizations if they feel that is appropriate. If they say we want to offer the CMC, we do have a CMC certificate, a CMC firm, for example, bring up this example again. If they want to offer the CMC to the association that represents the firms, they want to deliver that service to this organization. There is some fee arrangement, however that looks like. It would open the market or enlarge the market, not only open, but enlarge the market for new CMCs. And that would give us a little bit more flexibility how to deal with friends. Rima, please.
I just want to put it in a better perspective. Just like the UN offers us not-for-profit organizations that are operating globally, the UN consultative status entity, which puts us closer to working with any other UN entity, whether in consultative status or the UN bodies themselves. This is how we're envisioning it, kind of, to have affiliates that are affiliated with ICMCI, that work with the different IMCs, work with the different other bodies that might be kind of the in-between with ICMCI or with the IMCs. It's kind of broadening our network in order to make sure that we are properly representing the stakeholders to the management consultancy profession worldwide.
Yes, and we can approach new members in countries where we don't have members on a very low level. And then they become provisional members, and then they become permanent members or full members, or however we call it.
So, sorry, I'm just wondering, would this not be similar to how, we as Zimbabwe came on board because we became a chapter of South Africa for a while?
Correct, but do remember that wasn't part of our governance. So it was done through South Africa. Now we're trying to put it all in proper perspective so that it is included within our governance and stakeholder review.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So you could become an observer. You could have an observer status, and then you need a friend who supports you becoming a full member. First level is provisional, and then it's always that there is a mentoring organization country. So that is below. The observer status is below. It's open for almost everybody. We don't have a detailed concept. Do we want to charge money for that? A small amount? I think it would be worth it. And so it shouldn't be very expensive, but it shouldn't be for free. So something in between. And you're right. It's part of it is already reality, but if it's reality, we need to find some policy for that.
Okay, makes sense.
Any other questions or ideas on that? Good.
Can you explain a bit more about the hub concept for us,
The hub concept, yes.
please?
Dwight mentioned that, and it's also related to the stakeholder. It's the outcome of both committees. First of all, for now we have 4 regional hubs, and they are the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Europe. Every single hub has a different situation. For me as a European, we have the European Union. That is an organization that it's not comparable to any other part of the world, because it's not a national body or national level. It's international, but not really. It's not a global level. It's for we
It's
as
regional,
ICMCI.
Robert. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
it's regional.
It's regional. Yes.
Yeah.
We as ICMCI, we deal with the global organizations like UNIDO, like EBRD. The national organization, the national bodies, the national members, they deal on national level. Nobody's dealing with with the European Commission or whatever, because there is nobody's empowered to do so. So what we said is, it's very different from region to region, from hub to hub. So why don't we make what is called an agile hub? So they apply with a business plan and say, we need this and that environment. We need to be empowered to talk to European Union. We want to talk to European Union, and we need financial resources for that. So somebody needs to pay. We as ICMCI cannot, but maybe the members of the hub might pay, because that will cost some money. And talking about that, we said, well, why don't make it open for everything, more or less, like addressing the next generation consultants, the young consultants, because they are looking for international connections, and they would be interested to have international connections, and that might be even more attractive for them than being a CMC, because they say we want to be connected globally. And for our members, it would give them the opportunity to win new members. So if somebody says, I want to organize the Young Professional Hub, this is what we need, these are the resources we need, and this is how it will be financed. Why don't we leave it open? It's not a committee, it's not a task force, it's really a bigger in terms of more people joining a hub than a task force or a committee. And the business plan might say it is set up for 5 years, and after 5 years we evaluate and say, okay, didn't work out, we need another hub, or we say, wonderful, let's proceed, or let's change. And that would actually address some additional things which are in my back brain somewhere, because like developing or knowledge sharing on a global level, for example, to sustainability consulting. We all talking about sustainability, and we need to do some consulting projects, but how to do, for the time being, only very few people know, and even they don't. By the way, you will learn more about that in our meeting, in our conference. We have a wonderful program set up to address that in the conference. But why don't we set up a hub to develop consulting strategies to implement sustainability, or to implement sustainable strategy, whatever you call it. And that might exist for maybe 2 years, and then everybody knows, and we don't need it anymore because we have other things to take care of.
Okay, thank you very much.
So Robert, these could be hubs, these could be focus groups, these could be any type of professionals coming together to address one matter. It's different styles of enhancing communication and making sure that representation of anyone who would be interested in becoming part of ICMCI is there somehow.
Somehow,
Yeah.
but you address a very important thing. We need to discuss with our members, because it only makes sense if we can kick back to our members. If it's just to have something ICMCI wants to do with no use for our members, the hub, I don't think should be implemented. It's something that they say, okay, we want to win new young professionals as a new member. We don't have the resources, we don't have the knowledge, we cannot approach them. But on global level, it's much easier, because we post something on Twitter or wherever, and they find us, and we see that in our webinars. It's working on global level much easier than on national level. But we need to find a way how to attract them to become a member in their home country. Maybe not all of them. Some of them might say, I'm not interested, sorry. But some of them might say, okay, why not? It's fine to meet some people in person somewhere.
Can I ask, do they become self-governing? Because all these hubs can't put extra management pressure on you guys. So do the young consultant group actually manage themselves?
Well, they
Just
need,
as an example.
they need to a certain extent, but they need some sort of liaison to the board, and we need to know what's happening there, because we don't want to have a total mess of we will have a limited number of hubs. We cannot have 20 hubs at the same time. We don't have the resources to manage that. For the time being, we have 4, and maybe we can grow up to 6. So it's not that we, and if we see that it's so important and we see the benefit for our members, I am sure we have resources to have maybe 8, which would be rocket, yes, because it would double the number of hubs by now. Yeah. So it's not that we do everything and nobody knows what's happening. By the way, we need financial resources in any way. If they use our secretariat more than very, very, very basic, they need to pay, and maybe not the young professionals, because then our members might say, okay, I'm interested in this resource of new members. We pay €1,000 a year to have this hub running. And if we find 5 IMCs to pay, I think it will work out. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. I'm just thinking about 2 things. One is, women in consulting.
Yes.
We already have something like that, right?
Not on.
We had a campaign at one point, and that's CMC Women. That was a dedicated campaign during 1 month of this year, which was, I believe, July.
So we could eventually have a hub called Women in Consulting.
Again, it doesn't need to be a hub, but it could be a forum, it could be a working group, it could be any type of affiliation that actually puts this group together in order to make sure that they work with ICMCI in order to enhance the visibility, enhance the communication. And again, it all goes back to the 3 pillars of our strategy. And if this group puts together some sort of a business plan that addresses our strategy and mainly enhancing us reaching our goals easily, then yes, that group could happen. And they could, again, be either a hub or a task force or a forum. Just like we have now the Future Leaders Forum, they are together, they work together, and they have one liaison, which is one person that is on the board of ICMCI. So again, repeating that into different types of groups, whatever name we give them, working according to a certain terms of reference that the governance committee would be able to put together, then we're all working on the right track towards achieving our goal and our vision.
I'm just thinking about ICF, the International Coaching Federation, and they have a similar model in terms of working groups. And maybe there are things we could glean from there, because what I've seen is, I know they once asked me to speak on one of their working groups, but they actually hold events based on those working groups. And that in itself creates more mileage for the whole body, because, you know, each of them maybe runs a seminar once a quarter or a talk around a topic that they've been discussing. And that would be a way to actually grow our presence as well, as a body, because of those talks. And they could probably encourage non-members to even come through and maybe charge a small fee or something like that. So I'm just thinking, I don't know how it could work, but just from the ICF one, I thought that was quite an idea we could also use from what you've been saying as well.
Eric, you were aware of our Future of Management Consultancy Initiative, right? And all the webinars that were held. And the FLF, the Future Leaders Forum, is actually part of that initiative. And there were webinars held through the Future of Management Consultancy, plus some, let's say, talking forums that took place through the FLF. So we tried that model for the past year, and that's why we tested it, if you may say. And that's why now it is part of the priorities in our strategy, and looking into how it could be properly governed and how we could enlarge our stakeholders community through that. We tested.
There's one limit that is very critical, maybe. At a certain point, they need or they want to represent the industry. And this is what we do. This is what ICMCI is doing. And it has to be very clear that if they want to represent, it needs to be very, very well defined to whom and with which message, because what we need to avoid with every heartbeat is that they are running around and representing ICMCI and telling some stupid rubbish. And so that is, as long as they just link together and they share experience and exchange knowledge or whatever, it's just within the group, and the group might grow, which is perfect, but it's within the group. As soon as they approach, like talking about the European hub, it needs to, the representative person needs to be empowered by ICMCI with very strict regulations. But it's also possible that women in consulting, for example, to address that example, is that they want to be linked to a UN organization, because most probably there is a global organization for women in everything or whatever. And if they want to represent ICMCI in this organization, we need to be very careful. So that's, I think, up to this level, it's a question of resources, how many hubs, or however we call it, can be managed as ICMCI. And from this level, it's a very complex question, how to deal with the representation of the industry, because this is still our task. And as I said, it's everything it's very at the beginning, and we need to discuss, and it's very helpful that you bring in your experience from other organizations, learnings or not learnings. We need to start to discuss about that, and that will happen next year. 59 resolutions in the governance task force, and this is one out of them. Most probably one of the most effective and most complicated outcome. Maybe that we will say, okay, let's move that a little bit later. Let's do other things first, which might be more easier. But I would love to have that on top of priority. But let's see that's happening next year. Sorry, Joe, you raised your hand before you fall to sleep.
Okay.
Yes, please.
May I add some comment or suggestion regarding the map behind you? Okay, most continent is covered by yellow color, but two continents, Africa and South America, is covered by white. You should you should organize task force for develop these two continents, focusing on these two continents. It is very important. And for these 2 months, from August to September, we delivered online training for African countries, 7 countries. There are so many management consultants. Most of them are working for government and sometimes public organization, but some are individual management consultants. So ICMCI should focus on these 2 continents and develop our colleagues. This is my suggestion or comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we have the same goal in mind. That is, we want to lower the barrier, make it as easy as possible to approach as many people as possible. And being a little bit self-critical, maybe that has been a little bit too high in the last years. But it's not, it doesn't mean the job is done. We can set the frame, but there's still, the work needs to be done.
And in the developed countries, right, all over developed countries, management consultants are becoming older and older. Do you understand?
Yes.
But these 2 continent consultants are very young, according to the background of the countries.
Right.
So we must focus on these 2 continents. This is my idea.
Yes,
Thank you
right.
very much.
Okay. We are at the hour, very close. Is there anything else from your side? If not, thank you very much. Sorry, Peter.
Yeah, Robert, thanks. And Joe, thanks for your comment. We in South Africa, I think I'm a new kid on the block, so listening to what has been said, I think the thing that we've been struggling with and over the years in formal consulting and then into getting out of corporate and starting your own consulting practice is yes, to be self-critical, to look at the quality of what we bring through so that we don't have some of the reputational damages that we've seen is now internationally being caused by some of the big management consulting companies. And is to get that balance right. And my head is not at that place. I think once I've read through more documents is to get the balance in my head right to say, where do we hunt numbers and where do we look at quality? That balance I need to get my head around to where do we draw that line?
Yeah, easy said. I think we let me say it in that way. If this map behind me would be yellow, including the European part, we would have more quality too.
Oh no, I agree.
But and that the same to the CMC. If we discuss what's happening with the CMC approach is still quality. But the path to CMC might be adapted to actual situations, to actual lifestyle of people, to ensure quality, not to compete quality. And the same is to membership. We shouldn't take everybody as a member. We don't do. So we as essentially we don't do, and we will never have the situation that this map behind me is totally yellow. But there might be something that helps us to understand the country before we start the membership process. That might be the observer status, to affiliate and to learn more about the background and to understand how this country is working, and maybe to decide that that doesn't work. We need somebody else, or this country is not worth to invest time and resources. Yeah.
And Robert, it's actually for them to understand how we operate as well. And if
Yes,
it is within their means to continue to be with such an international entity at the terms that we require, with regards to, of course, quality, number one.
Sure.
Yeah.
But good point, of course. Okay. Now I think it's at the hour. Fine. Thank you for being here, for joining us. Hope to see you soon. Well, hope to see you next week, either in the morning or in the afternoon session. And have a good time until then.
Have a good time.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye,
And be
everyone.
prepared also to enroll in the conference that we will be announcing
Yes.
either tomorrow or after tomorrow. Short notice, but we were able to get good speakers. So stay tuned, okay?
Yes.